In this module, we are going to set up the portfolio problem. We're going to set up a simple problem and then look at how an individual looks at making in the investment. We are going to begin with two assets, asset 1, asset 2, and we will have more of those in the future. But right now, we're going to take funds and decide which of the funds should we invest in asset 1 and which of the funds should we invest in asset 2. If we invest 20% in asset 1, that means we have 80% to invest in asset 2. And this is the standard setup for all portfolio problems. Now, we're going to look at this from an individual investor standpoint and make several assumptions. The first is that individual is risk averse or at least risk neutral. What that means is that you will have to have a higher expected return to take on more risk. And that just makes sense, right? If I'm going to take on more risk, I want the possibility of having a higher expected return, or the likelihood of having the expectation of a higher expected return. Given that, this is what an individual's preferences will look like in expected return. Vertical axis gives us expected return. Lower axis or horizontal axis gives us risk. And in this case, our risk will be measured by our standard deviation. If you look at any one of these lines, this is the trade-off where an individual will be indifferent between two assets. If we have asset 1 here, in this case, this one will have expected return right here and standard deviation right here. That individual will be indifferent between that one and this asset. This asset has a higher expected return and higher risk than this asset. As we move in this direction, we increase the person's utility. They're better off by moving from a return that's an investment that's on A to B to C to D. So this individual will pick any investment that's on B rather than on A. But if we're looking at any two assets on A, they're indifferent. That's the way that we're assuming that investors' preferences look, and that squares with this assumption. They're risk averse. All right, given that, again, we can find any asset. Let's say it's asset 1. It's going to have this expected return here and this risk level here. Given the preferences that we just shown, this person will prefer assets here to A. So if we have asset A here, any asset here will be preferred. All right, if we look at this region, we don't know if the person will prefer this or this. But we knew that they don't want anything here. Worse. All right, if those preferences look this way, we know that any asset here is preferred. We don't know between these, and we would have to know exactly what their preferences are. And if asset A is here, they will never take a asset with risk and return here. All right, that's the basics of, if we believe in risk aversion, this is where that leads when we can say something about the expected return and risk of a portfolio.